You're packing boxes, maybe planning your next adventure, thinking about that new place. But there's always that one nagging question hanging over a move, isn't there? What about the end of tenancy clean? Is it just, another expense you have to swallow? Or is it actually a smart move, maybe even a strategic one for getting your deposit back? Today, we're taking a deep dive into this exact question. We're pulling insights from a really practical source. It's excerpts from Bournemouth Tenancy Clean, Deposit Protection Explained. Boom. We're going to unpack the reality of protecting that deposit, ideally without spending your entire weekend scrubbing, or worse, losing a chunk of it.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating here, I think, is that it's not just about how hard you try with the cleaning. It's about hitting a very specific standard, one that's usually documented. Landlords and agents, they don't really grade your effort, unfortunately. They do a rigorous comparison of the state of the property when you leave versus that check-in inventory report. And if it doesn't match up, well, that's when you start looking at deductions. And often, those charges can be quite a bit higher than just paying for a professional clean up front.
Exactly. So our mission today is really to arm you with the facts. We want to cover the why behind the standard and the practical how, so you can make a properly informed decision. Hopefully skip the drama and, get your full deposit back without too much fuss. So what does this all actually mean for you as you get closer to that move-out date?
Okay, so the burning question, the one every renter asks as moving day looms, is it actually worth it? Is an end of tenancy clean truly worth the money? If you're like most people, you definitely want your full deposit back, and you probably don't fancy spending your whole weekend scrubbing a really grimy oven. So for most of us, the short answer, based on what we're seeing, seems to be a pretty resounding yes, if you value your time and your deposit.
Absolutely. And this is where the whole deposit protection thing really comes into sharp focus. Landlords and agents, they're not just looking for good enough or, a quick tidy up. They're working to a clear benchmark, that initial check-in inventory, that document. It basically becomes the gold standard. And crucially, it's often linked to those government-approved deposit protection schemes. Right, those schemes where your deposit has to be held legally.
Exactly. Which means any deductions they want to make have to be justified. They need evidence. So if the property isn't returned at that exact same standard, and we're talking specific things here, the common culprits, like baked-on oven grease, that stubborn lime scale you get in bathrooms, dust inside kitchen cupboards, grubby skirting boards, maybe marks on the carpets. If those things aren't right, deductions from your deposit are, well, almost guaranteed. So paying a known, fixed cost up front to avoid unknown, possibly much larger charges later. That's not just sensible, it often turns out to be the smarter financial bet, especially when you factor in your own time and, frankly, the stress of arguing about it later. A professional clean basically makes sure your side of the evidence is solid.
That makes so much sense, especially framing it as evidence for those deposit schemes. So, okay, let's try and put some quick math to this, or at least look at the logic. What's the clear upside of getting it done professionally versus, well, the potential downside of not doing it or trying to DIY and maybe missing things?
The upside. It's very clear, very appealing. You protect your entire deposit, which, let's be honest, is usually a fair chunk of money.
Often hundreds, maybe over £1,000.
Exactly. And you also completely sidestep all the potential back and forth, the negotiations, maybe even disputes with the inventory clerk, which can be incredibly draining, can't it? Especially when you're already stressed with moving.
Totally.
The downside of paying for a pro clean, well, it's a one-off fee. You pay it, the job gets done, usually in a day, maybe even just a few hours for smaller places. Now, the real risk, if you choose to skip it or do it yourself, that's significant. You are very, very likely to miss those hidden bits, those subtle areas professionals are trained to look for.
Like what sort of things?
Things like the very top of the extractor hood above the hob, or the tops of kitchen cupboards where dust gathers, or that slight, almost invisible greasy haze on a shower screen that only really shows up under the bright torchlight they use for inspections.
Ah, right. Things you wouldn't normally notice.
Precisely. And when those get flagged by the agent, you either pay later through deposit deductions, or you find yourself doing frantic, last-minute recleans under huge pressure, which nearly always costs you more in time and money than if you just hired a professional in the first place.
Okay, so if we're talking about a proper end of tenancy clean, not just, a quick wipe down with good intentions, what does that actually involve? I bet a lot of listeners are wondering, do I really need to steam clean the carpets if they look okay to me? Let's cut through the fluff. What specifics should a really comprehensive clean cover to meet that crucial standard?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because the definition of clean, from a landlord or agent's perspective, especially tied to that inventory, is often far more rigorous than people think. What makes a clean meet that standard is, well, it's comprehensive. It covers areas that even diligent tenants often overlook. Let's maybe break down the checklist and why each bit matters. In the kitchen, this means a deep clean. Oven, hob, extractor fan, absolutely no lingering grease or burnt-on food. Splashbacks too. Inside all the cupboards and drawers, not just wiping the fronts, worktops, surfaces, the sink.
So really getting into the nooks and crannies.
Exactly. These are prime spots for deductions. Then, bathrooms. Critical areas here are removing all the limescale. Taps, shower heads, glass, shower screens, limescale is a huge giveaway. Plus, a thorough clean of tiles and grout, checking for mildew, and obviously sanitizing toilets, basins, baths, showers. Throughout all rooms, attention needs paying to skirting boards properly wiped down, free of dust. Sockets, light switches need a wipe, door handles polished, internal windows, mirrors left spotless. High and low, dust and cobwebs gone. And finally, all floors vacuumed thoroughly and hard floors mopped properly, no streaks. It's about leaving absolutely no stone unturned.
Wow.
And then key add-ons. Depending on what the check-in report says or the initial condition, carpet steam cleaning is often needed, especially if they were professionally cleaned before you moved in. That answers your earlier point.
Right, so if they're steam clean at the start, they need to be again.
Generally, yes, to match the standard. Also, cleaning blinds and thoroughly cleaning inside the fridge and freezer after defrosting. The goal across everything is laser-focused. Match that check-in report precisely. Give the inventory clerk absolutely nothing to flag for deductions.
That checklist is incredibly detailed. It really hammers home how much agents are looking for. I'm just imagining trying to tackle all that myself. Sounds like even someone really meticulous could easily miss a few spots. But let's zoom in a bit. You mentioned Bournemouth earlier, and the source focuses there. Why is this whole topic especially relevant, maybe even more critical, if you're renting somewhere coastal like Bournemouth, Poole, or Christchurch?
Well, if we connect this to how things often work locally in those specific areas, you see why it's quite important. Local agents in these coastal towns, in our experience and based on the source, often run incredibly tight inventories. They tend to be very meticulous.
More so than other places, maybe?
Sometimes, yes. If even a small detail isn't quite right, they'll likely note it. Plus, and this is a big one for coastal regions, hard water is a really common issue.
Ah, the lime scale again.
Exactly. It builds up fast. It's very visible, particularly in bathrooms, taps, shower screens. They betray you quickly if you haven't properly descaled everything. And the same logic applies to ovens, those subtle grease shadows or films, often almost invisible in normal daylight. But they show up really starkly under the bright lights inspectors often use during a checkout. So it's this combination of potentially more meticulous local practices and those environmental factors like hard water that really ramps up the need for a proper deep clean there.
Wow, okay. So the local conditions actually do make a tangible difference. Considering all that, then, who is this deep dive really for? Who should absolutely be thinking about booking an end of tenancy clean without maybe a second thought?
Well, the source material points to a few quite clear groups. These are the ideal candidates, really. First, tenants who just want their full deposit back with absolutely zero drama. No stress, no arguments, no lengthy negotiations.
Peace of mind seekers.
Definitely. Second, landlords or agents themselves. They need a fast, reliable, consistent way to reset the property between tenancies. Minimize those empty periods, keep new tenants happy, and thirdly, well, anyone who's genuinely busy, anyone who values their own time more than spending maybe 8, 10, even more grueling hours chasing grease and grime around a place they're about to leave anyway.
That probably covers a lot of people listening.
I suspect so.
But just to cover all bases, is there anyone who genuinely might not need this kind of professional service? Is there an exception?
There is, but it's a rare exception, I'd say. Look, if you have kept the place absolutely immaculate throughout your entire tenancy, not just tidy, but genuinely spotless, and if you honestly have the significant amount of time needed and access to the right industrial strength cleaning products and maybe even tools like steam cleaners, and critically, you have the really exacting, almost professional level standards required to perfectly match every single point on that original inventory report, then perhaps you could attempt it yourself. But honestly, in my experience, most people vastly underestimate the sheer effort involved. They underestimate the meticulous attention to detail needed and the specific techniques required to really hit that professional check-in standard. It's often much harder and takes longer than people think.
That's a very fair point. Okay, let's switch gears slightly and hit some common questions. Rapid fire style, just to ease some of those moving out nerves people might have. First up, this is a big one we hear. Can my landlord agent actually force me to get a professional clean?
Okay, good question. The short answer is no. They cannot force you to hire a specific company or indeed any professional cleaner at all. However, and this is the really crucial bit that sometimes gets missed, the property absolutely must be returned in the exact same condition of cleanliness as it was on day one, and that condition is documented meticulously in your check-in inventory.
Ah, so it comes back to the inventory standard again.
Always. If it's not up to that standard, they are entirely within their rights to deduct the cost of bringing it back up to standard from your deposit. So while they can't dictate who does the cleaning, they absolutely can and will hold you accountable for the standard of the clean.
Understood. Okay, next one. Do I really need to get the carpets and oven cleaned? Can I just give them a quick wipe and hope for the best?
Hoping for the best is probably not a good strategy here. If the carpets in the oven were noted as professionally cleaned, or just generally in a very clean state when you moved in, then yes, you absolutely need to match that state when you leave. These two areas, carpets and ovens, are probably the number one and two fastest triggers for significant deposit deductions,
Why is that?
because they are notoriously expensive for the landlord to sort out if you haven't done it properly, and they're incredibly difficult for an average person without professional equipment and chemicals to restore to that like new or professionally clean condition. Honestly, don't skimp on these two. They are the low-hanging fruit for agents looking for reasons to deduct.
Good to know. Okay, how long does a professional end of tenancy clean actually take? Is it quicker than doing it yourself?
Oh, definitely quicker than doing it yourself, usually. It can vary quite a bit, obviously. It might be just a few hours for a small studio or a one-bed flat. But it could easily be a full day for a larger house, say 4 or 5 bedrooms, multiple bathrooms, that kind of thing. The key thing is, a professional team comes in equipped. They have all the right tools, the commercial ready products, they have a system that work together. They will always complete the job significantly faster and far more efficiently than an individual trying to tackle it all alone.
Right, makes sense. And finally, the big one, that lingering fear. What if I do pay for a professional clean and the agent still flags something? Is my money just wasted then?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. And it really highlights the importance of choosing the right cleaning service provider. Reputable companies, the good ones, should absolutely stand behind their work. Many, including the service provider mentioned in our source material, offer something like a 48-hour or even 72-hour re-clean guarantee.
What does that mean exactly?
It means if the agent or inventory clerk carries out the checkout inspection within that time frame and flags any reasonable cleaning issues that were missed, the cleaning company will come back and fix those specific points, usually free of charge. The whole point of hiring a professional, really, is to ensure zero friction, to guarantee a smooth checkout process for you. It's about ensuring that deposit is returned without hassle or further stress. So definitely check if a company offers that kind of guarantee before you book.
That's really reassuring to know. Okay, so wrapping this all up, what does this really mean for you, the listener, as you prepare for your next move? The bottom line seems pretty clear, doesn't it? You pay a fixed, known cost up front, and in doing so, you confidently avoid an unknown and usually larger potential deduction from your deposit later on. Plus, and this is a massive bonus for most people, you get your entire weekend back. Instead of spending it hunched over, scrubbing away at a place you're about to leave.
Exactly. You hand over those keys, not with that knot of anxiety in your stomach, but with confidence. Knowing your property is genuinely checkout ready. Knowing you've got strong evidence, if needed, for your deposit protection.
Yeah.
That really is the whole point of the exercise, isn't it? Peace of mind, a smoother transition, and, most importantly, getting your full deposit safely back in your bank account.
So maybe think about it this way. Beyond just the money, which is obviously a huge factor, what's the true cost of your own time, your energy, and your peace of mind during what's already a pretty stressful moving period? Is the anxiety, the sheer physical effort, and the very real potential for a larger unexpected deduction, is all that really worth saving that initial fixed cost of a professional clean? It's definitely something to mull over as you plan your next steps and look forward to settling into your new home.